Welcome to Nobody Drives in LA, a car-free podcast. I'm Kyle Rebar, one of your hosts, and you'll be hearing from our other host, Eric Brightwell, in just a minute. We wanted to challenge the notion that LA is just for drivers. And so we'll be having interviews with transit activists, folks in local government, and fellow multimodal enthusiasts. We'll be covering biking, transit, pedestrian news, perhaps some city councils. We hope this podcast will both entertain and inspire you to get involved in your local transit and multimodal communities. This first episode, Eric and I talk about how we met and how we both first got interested in car-less and car-limited lifestyles. And with that, here we go. So, Eric, why don't we get started with, you can tell us a little bit about who you are, how you got into car-free stuff, and what you're hoping to do with the podcast.
Okay, so my name is Eric Brightwell. I've had this idea for a few years. I started a blog called, I don't know if you would call it like a blog series, I guess, called Nobody Drives in LA. That's meant to be provocative and because, everyone always says nobody walks in LA, which is not true. It's no truer or untruer to say nobody drives in LA. But I do feel like there's also a truth that driving in a city is not really driving. That's what I told someone in an interview once. I admitted I like driving, but sitting and looking at brake lights is pretty much more like circling around looking for parking. No one would consider that. That's not fun. That's not pleasurable. But I grew up mostly in central Missouri, and I left when I was 16, so it was right around the time I was learning to drive. I don't think I ever got my driver's permit. I mean, when I lived there. And then I ended up living in Florida for a little bit, less than a mile from my high school. So I just thought, why would I bother driving when I can just walk there? But then my dad, being a vain, obnoxious person with a sports car, a two-seater, would pile his two kids into the passenger seat and insist on driving us, probably drunkenly, always procrastinating, driving down the median of the road, just to get us to school on time. So I guess so that people could see his cool Toyota MR2, I think it was. But I just thought this is silly. I had a bike, I'd ride my bike to work, and I was totally happy walking places. And then when I lived in rural Iowa, so I ran away from home basically, not like knapsack style, but I didn't hop on a train or, thumb my way to Iowa. But I came to Iowa, rural Iowa, stayed with my mom. My mom had passed away when I was 16, which is why I ended up in Florida. I lived in rural Iowa, and that was the first time I felt, I actually have to have a car now, because my high school was like a 45-minute drive away in another town. My work was a 45-minute, I said mile, minute. Everything's measured in minutes out in the country, not miles. It's a 45-minute drive to my work, and that's down a country highway that has no shoulders, no sidewalks. It got 40 below zero sometimes in winter. There's no buses. There's no option except to drive to and from work, So I drove, and I didn't hate it. I was fine with it because it seemed like this makes sense. But then once I went to college, I was like, I don't want a car again, There's a free CAM bus in Iowa City, and I can walk everywhere. And it's more fun to walk in cities. You see more. So I've never loved driving in cities. It just seems like the least good option of getting around to me. But when I came out here, I drove out here like most people in a car, hand-me-down, like a car that one of my grandmothers had given me. And then when it was totaled, I replaced it because it was kind of ingrained in me once I lived out here that you have to have a car to be in Los Angeles, and that the only people that, ride the bus are people that have DUIs and they're just waiting to get back in their cars, or their car is in the shop, or they're just saving up for a car. So I got another car, and then it was a lemon, and it was getting more and more expensive and to maintain and repair. And then I knew people that rode bikes. I'm just kind of remembering it as we talk, or as I ramble. But I knew a couple, and they seemed like they were everywhere. Everywhere I went, they were always there, and they always rode bikes everywhere. And they seemed really fit, and I knew people that walked everywhere that seemed really fit, which is not fair, though, because you don't get fit just by walking. I can attest to that. But you maybe would be less fit if you drove everywhere. So I was like, how do they get everywhere on a... And so I just didn't drive my car for 7 months. And then after that, I was, it got towed because I hadn't moved it in so long. Because I honestly, it was parked on a side street, and then someone must have complained, and then I didn't even know that it had been towed for a while, and then I got like a notice from the impound lot or something like, come pay more money than you spent on this car to get it out, and or leave it with us. And I was like, do I really want a car anymore? And I mean, I thought, okay, I've been living for 7 months without a car, and then a friend of mine was planning on moving to New York around that time, and she said, "Do you want my car?" And I was like, "Let me think about it." And then I thought about it, and I thought, no, I don't. I don't want your car, and I don't want any car. I'll just rent one when I need one, or, I'll take a car share or whatever. Like, I mean, I don't have Uber or Lyft on my phone. That's one of the misconceptions I think about car-free Angelinos is everyone thinks, like, you must constantly be, like, posting on social media, like, hey, is anyone driving to this thing, and do you think I could get a ride? Mm-hmm. Which I never do. I admit I did do that in the early days, I'm sure, sometimes, not very often. And I don't have Uber or Lyft on my phone because it's just, I don't know, it's not something I really ever need. Once you've like kind of figured it out and structured your life around not driving everywhere, you probably will know ways to not, require a car.
So a little bit more about you, Eric. Yeah. You were talking, before we got into do the podcast, you were talking about you do a carless exploration blog.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of like neat projects you've worked on. So tell me a little bit about those.
I started writing about exploring neighborhoods for a Me blog, which was Amoeba Music's blog, and it didn't really have very much to do with the music store. So at first my editor was kind of like, this is all off topic, but then we looked at how it was getting a lot more traffic than, to be honest, just all the other bloggers, sometimes combined, and we had a team of like 25 bloggers, and I would try to work it in and make it relevant to the store because one of the things about Los Angeles, so I would just, whatever neighborhood I was in, yesterday I was in Montebello, so if I was in Montebello, I might be like, this is where the band Great White is from, and then there's a link to buy all the Great White, they had like one hit, a cover of a Ian Hunter song, I think. But and then I think Conan O'Brien's assistant is from there, and there's she's Armenian, and there's an Armenian community there, and so I would try to tie it into stuff that had to do with this director or this actor or this even things like this mom and pop DVD store that specializes in Armenian movies or whatever, because that wasn't really competition with us because we didn't have anything like that, and it was like promoting the idea of DVD and music stores. So I would tie it into that. And then from there, I started KCET, the public television station, asked me if I wanted to do an exploration series for them. I hadn't even thought about the fact that I didn't do it in a car, I don't think. I just thought, like, if you're going to explore a neighborhood, you can't do it in a car because you're not going to see or you're not going to notice anything. Or you're going to miss so much. I mean, I don't think you can really know a city if you drive everywhere, unless you're Jonathan Gold. There is the Jonathan Gold exception. If you drive to every single restaurant in a pickup truck and eat at every single place, and you're Jonathan Gold, you can get to know a city. But everybody else, like, that just drives everywhere, I feel like you don't know anything about your neighborhood. You know how to get on the freeway and how to get off and what places at both ends that you like. But my editor at KCET, Yosuke, was like, you should make your title be something about how you explore on foot. Like, that's your angle. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess that is sort of, there aren't that many people that get around exclusively on foot. Not that I get around exclusively on foot, but I explore on foot. So I started writing block by block for KCET, which I wanted to call California Fool's Gold because that was an homage to Yul Hauser, who had a bunch of series for KCET, was a big, he died of cancer about 10 years ago maybe now, but he was a very well-known and beloved Southern California explorer who had a show called California's Gold, and they were like, you can't call it California Fool's Gold, but he's dead now, so I can. So now I call it California Fool's Gold now in homage to him, and but then I also have a series, Nobody Drives in LA, and various other series, but those are kind of like my main two
So I guess mysterious voice that is me. Right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
I'm Kyle Rebar. I'm
I
originally.
have a question first, but
Yeah.
just to interrupt right away. Is that your real last name?
That is my real last name. Yeah.
Okay.
My dad is Rebars. My mom's family are Romans. We even check back to Ellis Island stuff because I'm basically a walking pierogi. But like there's no Ellis Island changes to that name. They were Rebar in the old country. They're Rebar here.
Because this morning I looked up rebar to find out what is the etymology of, reinforced bars or whatever. Like, what? And I was like, oh, okay. So it's not an acronym. It comes from, but your name is, yeah. That's,
So
okay.
in my Rebar family, they are Ellis Island people from Slovakia back in the day, and in Slovak it means, I believe, fisherman.
Mm-hmm.
So that is like the ye old country meaning of that name, or at least what my great grandmother said that's what it means. I wish it were a pseudonym because that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it sounds punk.
Yeah, right. So I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is it's a city of like maybe 50,000 on a good day, barely a city. There's very limited bus service. Total car country, total everything is single use zoning. When I was a kid, though, my friends and I discovered that we could take, maybe like 5th or 6th grade, we could take, like, there was one cult bus, Lackawanna County Transit System, whatever, that we could take to the Steamtown Mall in Scranton. And this was, like, our first, like, taste of freedom, like, ever. A bunch of really, hyped up 6th graders hopping on a bus to go to downtown Scranton to the mall, because that was the only thing in downtown Scranton. And that really left an impact on me, right? And I didn't really think much of it. I went on to have a car-centered life in high school, and when I was in college, this was maybe around like 2008, give or take, the first like financial crisis, and the gas prices just like went through the roof. And I was working in a sandwich shop at the time, right? So I thought like, hey, maybe I can, save money if I started taking the Scranton bus back and forth to school. And I did that probably for about 2 years.
I have to interrupt and ask what sandwich place, because I worked at a sandwich place when I lived in Florida. I think we had a lot of weird parallels.
Yeah.
I worked at Blimpie in Tampa.
First, I worked at Subway.
Oh, so you're a sandwich artist?
Yeah,
Is that?
I like to think of myself as an artist, but I think I'm only legitimately a sandwich artist.
Yeah.
I worked at Subway for a year, and then I worked at there is a grocery store chain in the Northeast called Wegmans. You can kind of think of it as like a less pretentious Whole Foods.
Okay.
And so I worked in the Wegmans sub shop for a little while, before transitioning to work at a local meat market grocery store. So I did that for a little while, and but the trouble that I found in my hometown was the buses stopped running after 5. So it was very hard for me to go to class, go to work, blah blah blah, back and forth. But after school, I moved into the country. So I always wanted to like live in the woods and like blah, 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 explore all this kind of stuff. And I did, but that, as you were saying before, is 100% car-dependent lifestyle. So I found when I was living in this small town of maybe 600 people that I would need to drive to work, drive back, drive to the grocery store, drive an hour to go to the movies, drive an hour and a half to go to a local music show.
Well, I'm curious, too, what the landscape is like, because I'll tell you, like, driving past hog lots, soybean fields, and cornfields, it gets really old really fast.
Yeah.
And, like, people, I don't know, people that I knew that lived in Iowa were like, we have so much nature, and I don't know how you want to live in a city. I was like, this isn't even nature, though. I mean, corn doesn't grow in rows like this, alternating with soybeans and hog lots. Like, Iowa's the most human-modified state in the U.S., I believe. Like, 98% of it has been changed. All the tall grass prairie and forest knocked down, and then they plant stuff, and they're like, isn't this great that we have, like, the great outdoors here? No parks. I don't think there's no national parks. Like, but anyway, yeah, so what's your landscape that you're driving through?
So northeastern Pennsylvania is just a giant forest.
Nice.
All of the town, you can think of it kind of like as if you're living inside the bottom of a bucket.
Yeah.
And so you have like the towns that are kind of tracing the river at the bottom of the bucket, and you just got walls of trees and mountain around side of you. So you're just looking at a wall of trees, and
like that,
deer live in the trees. So I got dive bombed by a bunch of deer I hit deer, deer hit me, however you want to phrase that. It really like messed me up. And at that point, and also too, I'm bad at driving in the snow. So like going to work in the winter would be like, oh, I guess I might die today.
Right. But then again, that's one of those things. It's like, yeah, but There's no...
You gotta.
But riding your bike in the snow is even worse.
So I moved to, I was working for a yoga retreat center at the time, and so I moved to the town where this was located, which is, the town is just one street. I lived on that one street, and probably for like 3 or 4 years, I just lived and worked in that same town. Like, I'd walk to work, I'd walk to the coffee shop, walk to the grocery store, and that was kind of like my first flirtation with carless living, in a town of, maybe 2,000 or 3,000, Honesdale, Pennsylvania.
If I can interrupt again, just because that's funny, because so when I lived in rural Iowa, the town I worked in was Knoxville, Iowa, and I worked at a Hardee's. And I remember thinking, like, how much, my first place that I rented in Iowa City was $180 a month. So renting, like, I don't know what a rental would have been in downtown Knoxville. Knoxville probably has like somewhere in the area of like 15,000 people. But it was one of those, it's like the size of town where there's a town square and like a cluster of things, maybe a couple streets around the town square, and with mixed use, where there's like a second story where there's like living up above and then a shop down below. Mostly probably like vacuum cleaner repairs, like tax preparers, not things that you just stroll around looking at, like not a thriving downtown. And then beyond that, like next to the freeway, some big box stores and restaurant chains and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, like, I could just live here and not drive to and from work to another boring area of this boring state.
Yeah, absolutely. That was, for me, that was like a very eye-opening experience too. And I found like just not driving, I was in a little bit better shape because I could just walk around. It's a pretty hilly town. So then I moved out to LA, and we moved to Santa Monica. Initially, I'd traveled here a bunch of times, and I liked that it was walkable. Like the first couple of work trips I took out to LA, I love the ocean, I love being outdoors, and I liked that the entire city of Santa Monica, you could walk, you could bike to it. There's bike lanes all over the place, and this was like, whoa, what's going on here?
Was walkability in your vocabulary yet?
No.
Because that's funny, because when I came here in my car, it broke down in Boyle Heights, and I walked around, and I remember, I didn't use the word walkability, that wasn't in my vocabulary either, but I remember walking around, for better or worse, I guess you could call it downtown Boyle Heights, like the core of walkable urban of Boyle Heights, and I just thought, wow, this, like, I could live here, like, and it wasn't me thinking about that I could live here because it was walkable. It was partly just, oh, look, it's like thriving. And I don't know. It just seemed like such a more pleasant place. And when I was first going around Los Angeles, it was always these areas like San Fernando and Lincoln Heights where I would see bustling little walkable areas. And I would think, or like downtown San Pedro, stuff like that. I would just instinctively, I always thought like, this seems like a place that you could live in, without even having that concept of walkability or transitability.
Yeah, well, the fact that there was a train that landed right in downtown Santa Monica blew my mind.
So what year did you get here?
2019.
Okay, so I got here in 1999, so there was...
Oh, wow.
There was almost, there was the red line and the blue line then, I think, because I think the purple line, and I forget what they're called now.
D-line.
The purple line's the D line?
Yeah.
And the red line is the B line?
Yep.
Okay, so those were both the red line at the time, and then there was the line to Long Beach, which is now the A line. Oh, and then there was, the green line, which is what,
That's like runs along
C
the 210.
line?
Yeah, the C line.
The 110, I think.
The 110.
The only train line that, for a long time, that didn't go through downtown, the only metro train line. And when I first rode it, I never saw anyone on it, and, I mean, I never paid, honestly, because it's, statute of limitations is expired. But I was like, who is this for? Because it hardly went anywhere at the time. So I don't know when it started, but I remember watching Speed in Iowa City. It ends, like the climax is on the red line with Dennis Hopper and Keanu Reeves, and thinking like, oh, I didn't know there was like a train in Los Angeles. Maybe it's not such a dump after all, Because I never had wanted to live here. I hadn't just my ideas about Los Angeles were entirely based on pop culture, like music, movies, TV.
Yeah, right.
And I thought it looks like everything I don't like about Florida, magnified like times 10. But then you get here and you see these walkable areas and stuff. And actually, my friends all lived in Santa Monica at the time in the Pico neighborhood. And so I was driving back and forth between when I first visited in 98 with my friend's house in Chino in the Inland Empire to Santa Monica, back and forth every day. So I would see these big swaths. I would see, a large section of Los Angeles, but from a freeway mostly. So you're seeing like freeway walls, and then going through the San Gabriel Valley and seeing like Chinese signage from the road and being like, what's going on there? Like, I've never heard anything about the San Gabriel Valley. You hear about the valley, it's the San Fernando Valley, and even, the stereotypes of the San Fernando Valley are pretty outdated now too. But anyway, sorry to interrupt and go on that train of thought, but
yeah,
you were talking about walkability in Santa Monica when you first got here and that there was a train.
Yeah.
So the train had opened then.
It just blew my mind that exists. Like, I lived in the Northeast about 2 hours from New York, and I had only visited the city once or twice. And me being in the throes of car braindom at that point, I had never thought, I could take the train in New York. I drove foolishly, and I walked foolishly. Why would I ever do that, right?
Yeah.
So just the fact that a city had something like that was like totally beyond me. So I started working.
I should tell you, I rode on the first train into Santa Monica on the front car of the first train on the first day. So I had an inside scoop from somebody at the Los Angeles Times, and she was like, because there were trains departing for Culver City in the morning that morning, and then she was like, okay, this is the one that's going to Santa Monica. I just got word, so like, let's get in the front. And so and before that I walked from downtown. I walked along the route so that was one of the things I used to write for KCET, was kind of previewing the lines. So I walked the route of the Purple Line all the way to the VA. I walked the route of the Expo Line all the way to Santa Monica. I walked the Gold Line to Azusa from Pasadena. I walked the Crenshaw Line. So I used to walk them, and that was one of the things that people are like, that's crazy. How can you walk that far? And sometimes it's like, I don't know, it's like, it's a long walk, but, people go to the gym and walk nowhere for hours.
Yeah, right. We get a lot of, so we live near the West Side Comedy Club, and we tell our friends, like, we're just going to walk down to West Side, see you at the show. Like, well, how far is it? Oh, it's like a mile. How could you ever walk a mile? Yeah. Like, to me, it's strange that people don't walk places, But, I work in sustainability now, and the thing that, really killed the car for me, I was going to work on a commercial, to sort a bunch of composting and recycling and, really disgusting job. And it was going to be an overnight shoot, and it took me 2.5 hours to go from Santa Monica to Glendale.
That's freedom. The freedom of going exactly where you need to go in that car.
I'm going to be late to get to the warehouse. I'm going to be late to set.
It's so stressful when you have a deadline and you're sitting in a car.
And there's nothing you can do.
Nothing you can do about it except honk and just make it worse.
Yeah. And that really did it for me. And I had been thinking when my car dies, I'm just going to replace it with an EV. I'm like, what if I just didn't replace it when my car dies? So
where did you have this moment? Because I'll admit, when I sold my car, I was like, is this possible? Can I do this? There was you can buy another car, but it felt like I'd made a really crazy decision, because everyone constantly tells you have to have a car.
Right.
And anytime someone visits Los Angeles, they're like, okay, well, what you're going to want to do is rent a car, which to me now, that is so insane, because I imagine going to London or Tokyo or Paris and being like, okay, I'm in Paris, I got to rent a car and drive. The idea of driving in an unfamiliar city, it just adds to the stress in ways that I get stressed out thinking about it and I'm not doing it. It's it's one of those stress dreams or something. Why would you want to no, don't drive once you get here. Don't rent a car. Figure out where you're going, where you're staying, and then walk to stuff around where you're staying, because I tell people this all the time. There's so much stuff to do in Los Angeles that whatever part of the city you stay in, you're going to be you're not going to be at a loss for stuff to do. You stay in the South Bay, there's so much stuff walkable in the South Bay, or transitable or bikeable, and you stay in Pasadena, whatever, wherever you stay, just don't try to see everything, because you're not going to.
Yeah, you can't.
And all you're going to see are brake lights and parking structures, and you're going to be miserable.
So it's very much, LA is very much like a pocket universe kind of city. Just pick your pocket universe and stay there.
One of the first things that reminded me of when I got out here was going to Epcot Center as a kid in Florida, and there's an area of Epcot Center where it's like, oh, this is Morocco, and there's Canada, I remember, and there's, probably, I don't remember specifically, there's Paris probably, or France, or their little countries are represented by these things, and then coming here and being like, oh, there are the regions like San Gabriel Valley and the West Side and the South Bay, but then there are also these little pocket areas, I mean, one of my favorite things coming here, because I had two friends that were basically showing me around the first time I came, and one of them was from Pomona and one was from Chino, and one was showing me all the stuff like, this is the Walk of Fame, this is the Chinese Theater, the Hollywood sign, honestly, stuff that I really don't give a shit about. The other friend was showing me stuff like, Chinatown, Little Tokyo, sort of touristy stuff, but different. I remember we went to Broadway, which was still very much like a Latino shopping district then, and we went to a Botanica and Grand Central Market, and I thought, okay, this is more, sort of the more like 500 Days of Summer tourist version of Los Angeles. But then just going around, like sitting in the back seat of their cars, because they drove everywhere, and I remember like going down Fairfax and smelling Little Ethiopia before, and not knowing what it was, because it looks mostly like any other neighborhood, and I was like, like it smells like a church or something. It was like frankincense and myrrh, and then unfamiliar cooking smells, and I was like, what is this? And it's called Little Ethiopia, and I was like, stop the car and like, let's get out, because I've never had Ethiopian food. I don't know anything about Ethiopian culture. And then I remember we kept going, like Koreatown is so hard to miss. And Koreatown, it may sound crazy now, because people have obviously, like, the San Gabriel Valley and Koreatown have been celebrated in documentaries and by the culinary scene, and people know of them now that aren't from within those communities. But at the time, Koreatown was kind of seen as like a thing for, it wasn't like an outward facing enclave like Chinatown or Little Tokyo, where they want you to come there and take pictures, and it was just like, oh no, it's just a functioning, vibrant neighborhood that happens to have the biggest population of any neighborhood in Los Angeles and the most population density. And my friends were like, no, there's nothing for us there. And so that to me was a signal like, okay, I'm going to go here tomorrow and spend the whole day in Koreatown just walking around, because that's the best way to explore, is like not knowing exactly where you're going, just follow your nose. That was such a memorable day, even though like nothing really worth noting in a journal or documenting really happened. It was just like, oh, I walked to this mall and I went into these stores and I saw these unfamiliar fruits or whatever, and like smelled these unfamiliar smells, and it was just new to me. But yeah, so I love that it's like being able to travel the world a little bit here without having the finances to actually travel the world.
So on the subject of like getting around, right? How do you get around LA? What's like what's your transportation profile?
I think I mostly probably walk, and then take my bike, and then the bus. So those are probably my top three: walking, biking, and busing. What about you?
So I'm full disclosure, I'm not car free yet, but I'm moving towards it. Right now, probably most of my day-to-day getting around, I have a PV, I have a one-wheel. I was taking a bike, but that got stolen, so I can stash that in my backpack and I'm good to go.
Is a PV one of those things that looks like a skateboard?
With a big old wheel in the center of it. Okay. So I ride that in the bike lanes, and that's like 90% of how I get around Santa Monica.
That's something I would never even think about.
Yeah, it's amazing.
No, but it's so helpful to have other people's perspectives. Little tangent again, I just heard someone talking about skateboarding. I think it was on, if I could remember which podcast it was on, I would mention it. Maybe, I don't remember. But he was talking about skateboarding as transit. And that's something I'd never thought about. Oh, cool. Like not just doing tricks in a skate park or whatever, grinding on rails and doing ollies and stuff. It's just, getting from point A to point B and how great it can be. And I was like, now when I have my litany of ways of getting around, I'm going to say like busing, biking, scooting, skating, walking, I'm adding skating to the mix because Yeah. Even though it's something I've never thought about, I've only ridden a scooter, like an electric scooter, once for one block. Just to try it out. I was like, I'm curious, I'll ride it. And I was like, why would I ride this? I have a bike.
I think scooters are like quite terrifying, honestly. Like it's hard, it's easy to pick one up and go, but I don't think they handle rough conditions well in the way that a good bike or the way that
that way.
one-wheel
Like
can.
I might hit the seam of like 2 patches of concrete and just get wedged in there and die.
This is the end.
But anyway, so you use a PV mostly?
Right. So I use my one wheel day to day, probably for like distance transit. I use that the most. Probably anything that's within, I don't know, 2 to 3 miles, I'll take my one wheel to. Going to school at SMC, going to the gym, that kind of stuff. 2 would be walking. Anything in my neighborhood, I just walk to downtown Santa Monica, walk to the grocery stores. I walk my surfboard to the beach to surf. So that's probably 2. 3 to get around. I would say I take the E-line pretty regularly, to downtown and back. And I recently started playing around with the buses because I got rained on with my one wheel, and not wise to take an electric skateboard out in the rain.
Is it heavy?
That's about 35 pounds.
Okay. So
but for me,
for some people.
Heavy for some people. For me, it's a warm-up farmer's carry. So I started taking the big blue bus back and forth from the gym that I go to in Pico, to my neighborhood. I'm like, oh, this is fantastic. So I've been playing around with that. If I'm going to go to a concert at night now, I realized I could take the 720 from Santa Monica to the Hollywoods.
720 is a great line.
And so for me, driving right now is mostly, again, because I work... I do a lot of editing, and I also work doing sustainability on commercials, which is probably the most car-brained industry on the planet.
Well, I mean, I do think it's important, like, to acknowledge that it's not possible, even in a city, for everyone to be car-free with the way the city is set up right now. I know people that are substitute teachers. I'm like, how would you, figure out going to all these different schools just using mass transit or a PV or whatever? If you're trying to go to multiple meetings in different parts of it. Like, there are some people gardeners, like real gardeners, that have like rakes and stuff, it's hard to imagine doing it. I'm sure there are some people that do that on a cargo bike, but I do think that part of my goal with this podcast is to be honest about that stuff and to help people figure out maybe how they can get out of their cars more often when it's feasible and how to make it more feasible in more situations. But also not to shame people for driving sometimes because, the way it's set up, that's the only practical way for some people to get around, unfortunately.
So I guess maybe how about for the last arc of this introductory episode, who are your favorite LA transit advocates? Who do you follow? Who do you recommend people follow?
Well, let's see. I mean, Alyssa Walker, she has a Walker in LA is her website. I think she's still active on that. She's one of the co-hosts of LA Podcast, and that is her real name, Alyssa Walker. She's inspirational. I would say Streets for All is an inspirational organization that advocates for all kinds of multi-modal mobility, but I would say they're primarily they're very bike heavy and very sort of more west side than my side of town. There's an organization that has not been around that long that's in my area called Bike LA Central, I believe. Bike LA Central or Bike Central LA. But yeah, Talking Headways is a great podcast. Streets Blog is a great website. Streets Blog LA. Gosh, but yeah. Surprisingly, there's more than you'd think of that. But none, as far as I can tell, none of them have podcasts about transit. That's part of why I was like, okay, I kind of waited. I was like, is Streets Blog ever going to do a podcast? Is Streets for All ever going to do a podcast? Alyssa Walker has a podcast, like I mentioned, but it's not about transportation. I mean, I'm sure it touches on it sometimes, but you know what I mean? I was just like, okay, no one's going to do it, so I guess I have to.
I'm surprised about that, too. I do a fair amount of volunteering with Surfrider LA and a little bit in the past with Heal the Bay, too. So I'm really interested in beach cleanups and, native plants, environmental stuff. But I noticed too that there's not a whole lot of people that are doing podcasts about it out here. And also for me, when you made the post on Reddit on I think it's Car Independent LA, I was like, oh, this is something that I've wanted to see for a while.
Yeah.
That it's like, hey, let's get together and do it, right?
Yeah, I went to Car Independent LA on Reddit just because there's one called like Ask Los Angeles, and people are always asking, so when I visit Los Angeles, like after I rent my car, blah, 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 and I'm always saying like, here's what you should do, like return that car right away, and then,
Here's a Metro card.
Right, yeah, you want to get a Metro card, and right, and so people are like, you should go on Car Independent LA or whatever, and I was like, okay. I didn't know that was a subreddit, so.
Yeah. There's a person I recently met up with in Santa Monica. Their Instagram is Mobility for Who. She posts a lot about bike lanes, pedestrian access on the west side, and she just organized with a couple other folks a bike ride / talk about community projects ride on Sunday. So we met up at City Hall in Samo, rode around, and we stopped at a couple of places to talk about bike lane infrastructure things that are coming up in council meetings. So about modifying transit or putting in traffic blocks on Michigan to limit car access to that, or to make it more walkable, or so schools aren't like getting blasted with cars when kids are coming out of them, stuff like that. Anyway, the goal of that was to get people out to council meetings, to write your council members, to get folks involved in advocating for transit measures locally. Because if we don't get out and talk about this stuff, the NIMBYs certainly are going to. So for me, I think there's a little bit of, like, one, it's great to, like, use the bike lanes, ride the one wheel, walk around, do that stuff. But also it's equally important to, I need to start showing up to be a voice for this stuff where I can, when I can,
Yeah, if I could say a little bit more about that, but first I want to also mention, there are other just like social media accounts that I follow. That there's one called Fix the City, and I don't know the woman that runs its name, but she mostly just posts about riding a bike around all over the place, and I don't know if she's still there, but she posted that she went on it. She was in Taiwan, which is one of my favorite places, partly for its transit accessibility to everywhere on the island, but she was taking high-speed rail and riding bikes and walking, and like places I recognized on the east coast of Taiwan, and I was, but yeah, so I follow her, and then there's a woman, Emily Hahn, that goes by Multimodal Emily, and she had a blog of sorts called, I think it was Moving Stories or Moving Stories LA, and that was another inspiration for me because she kind of tried, much less judgy than me, would interview different people about multimodality in Los Angeles, and some people, that she would talk to would be fairly hostile about buses or trains, and she would refrain from snapping on them, which I was like, that's really cool to like be measured about that. But I would just want to say that is one of the things that I think would be good to have about a reason to have a podcast like this, is because I think there is more stuff going on transit related that is worth having discussions about, that I don't feel like there is that much of a discussion about. Like the neighborhood councils do have transportation and mobility committees, most of them. There's 99 neighborhood councils in Los Angeles. The city has a transportation committee. They talk about items all the time. And then there's all kinds of stuff in the news all the time. The Healthy Streets Initiative just passed overwhelmingly with almost 2/3 of Angelenos voting.
We should do an episode about that
specifically. I would love to. And then what else? The Lyft bike share, there's a controversy about that because some people don't think that a company that has undermined labor laws and mass transit throughout the world is the best partner for a bike share. But some people honestly are fine with them. The gondola, people have mixed opinions about that. I personally don't hate gondolas, but I think that no one's going to use it as public transportation. I can't imagine anyone that's driving their car from the far reaches of the county driving all the way to, because if they're not taking public transportation to the stadium now, I don't see why they would all of a sudden start, now I can take the A line from Long Beach to Union Station, and then I'll just stand in line for this gondola and then when the game's over, I'll just get into this huge line to take the gondola back to Union. Like, they're not going to do that. They're going to drive, and they're going to, I don't know. I just think it's terrible for a lot of reasons that I've heard all these other reasons about why the gondola is terrible, but I'm like, one of the main ones is that no one's going to ride it. And that money could be, I also just think that it's just one more thing where, like the Tesla tunnels that Elon Musk proposed a few years ago, it's just another way for the private sector to say, let's put the brakes on investing in what we know works for a few years, and like, let's hear what this guy has to say, this monorail salesman, and
that is extremely frustrating.
It's so frustrating.
Is even a discussion that we're having in the first place.
Let's just how about we have like 4 entrances to the stadium open up and like express buses running all the time, and maybe have a dedicated bus lane up the entire length of Sunset Boulevard. And what about maybe Sunset Boulevard is an important enough street that it could have sidewalks along the entire length of it, because it doesn't right now. Things like that are so much cheaper, and just I mean, one of my big things is just dedicated bus lanes. It doesn't cost anything except like the red paint and political will, and there's more red paint than political will in this city, and so we just say, well, let's try another solution, like maybe digging a tunnel that Teslas can drive through, and then let's not think about, there will be flying Ubers soon enough. Now, we don't know where they're going to land or take off from, and I'm sure we'll get that all sorted out, though, if we just leave it to them.
I saw a post about that this morning that was, like the futurism of the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Like, your island houses with your flying cars in between them as a vision for the future.
Yeah.
Where is the vision of the future that is just, density and functioning mass transit? Oh, wait, like New York.
Yeah, it's called Tokyo.
Yeah.
Like a city where people walk and take trains. I mean, yeah.
Speaking of Sunset, I went to a public works career fair a couple of weeks ago. I'm like, okay, great. I'm gonna take the E line down, swap to the A. I'll just walk the last half mile to get there. And it was a similar situation where as soon as I got off of the train station and walked up, I think it was Sunset. It might have been a different street, but I'm getting there, and like the last section of this, there's no sidewalk. Just I'm gonna walk on the shoulder of the road and hope I don't get blasted.
Yeah, I just read some article about a guy in I think it was in Dallas, who got a citation for riding his wheelchair in the street, but where there was no sidewalk.
Yep.
And he doesn't have use of his legs, so it's like, what?
Yeah.
What? It's just so frustrating. And I mean, I think in that case, I think the cop just gave. I can't even believe I'm giving them credit for this. They didn't give him a monetary fine, but it's like, to even stop him. Like, you can't I don't know, maybe you can ride a wheelchair in like a grassy ditch next to a highway or whatever, but like, that they there's a bunch of empty cars that aren't being used by anyone, that they're given free storage space all along that road, and it's like, why can't you just get rid of that and let people in wheelchairs use this?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about, transit and accessibility too, like, there's a huge equity issue to this, right? Like, but not everyone can drive. And I think that's a thought that most people don't even think about. Like, maybe you don't have depth perception.
Which is funny, because that does I will say, people do flip it and say, like, well, not everyone can ride a bike. And I'm like, yeah, but surely anyone that can drive can ride a bike or a bus or a train or, or like there's probably some way that like if you have the physical capability of driving a car, then I just feel like there's probably a solution, maybe an e-bike or something like that.
Right.
Like,
and if you have infrastructure to get around without a car, if you have biking infrastructure or if you have walking infrastructure, I'm not an expert on this, but it seems like walking infrastructure is a lot more friendly to wheelchairs or other modes to get around than a shoulderless
Although I will say, I mean, there are lots of parts of Los Angeles where the sidewalks are so narrow and they're obstructed by utility poles and old abandoned newspaper bins and
sections that haven't been. So I see this a lot on the west side. If I'm going like up Bundy, there's a lot of sections of the sidewalk near trees that haven't been adjusted in several years.
Right.
So you'll be walking along and oh, the sidewalk suddenly has a 6-inch,
Right.
lip on the front of it. And maybe you're on a street that's too heavily trafficked that you can't bike alongside it or you can't wheelchair alongside it. You get to that, you're stuck.
Yeah, no, and with sidewalks, one of my frustrations is that everything ends up getting pushed onto the sidewalk. And we talked about earlier off mic about how much we like seeing people dining outside, but I would much rather take away space from a car parking spot and put that outdoor dining there than have it on the sidewalk and make it impassable for someone using a walker or a stroller or a wheelchair when there's already everything else gets pushed. It's the same kind of thing. I mean, similar situation, just homeless encampments. I don't want to come after people who can't get into housing, but we send a very clear signal when we say just take over the sidewalk instead of take over a parking lane. We're like, okay, you can just take over because if you try to walk or ride a bike under a freeway, because there's such a huge, number of unhoused people, it becomes it's really scary to walk or ride a bike under a freeway overpass because you have to go out into the road. And I don't know, it's a complicated issue because, like I said, I personally am not just saying displace the homeless people and make them go somewhere else. But I think displace parked cars and make them find somewhere else to be stored is maybe a solution.
That is interesting that it's, take over the sidewalk and not take over the parking lot.
It's a way of saying, you're the lowest priority. Nothing can impede a car. You could have a road that's Huntington Drive is 13 lanes wide, no bike lanes, and a huge median in the middle, no bike lane on it. And then on the sidewalks, there are signs that say, no riding your bike on these sidewalks, which barely get any pedestrian use because they have basically this freeway that ironically was built by the guy that built Pacific Electric Railway, Henry Huntington, to take his private train to his private residence, which is now Huntington Gardens. And he made all of his wealth running the largest interurban electric rail system in world history. And now it's just a big freaking freeway. A lot to unpack.
We've got our work cut out for us.
Yeah.
I hope you got a sense of Eric and me, who we are. Our next episode will feature Malin 2, who's a car-free reporter here in LA. Would like to give a quick shout out to the LA Public Library. We're currently recording in their Octavia lab. We also use their Koreatown Media Lab sometimes. An extra special shout out to Emily Smith, who designed our cover art. Emily is also a long distance biker. Her Instagram is eSmiley. Be sure to subscribe, leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you happen to be. You can follow our Instagram. And with that, we'll see you next time.